Hello guys, welcome back to your own channel Wisdom Bloom. Myself Rupanjan Chakravarti, and today we are going to take reproduction organisms, another chapter from class 10th biology. So in this particular lecture we will be studying about what is reproduction, what is the need of reproduction, and some common ways of reproduction. So what is reproduction? Reproduction is the formation of new organisms from pre-existing organisms. And what do you mean by that? For example, you were created by your father and mother. Your father and mother performed reproduction. That's why you came to existence. Right? So it is the process of formation of new organisms from pre-existing organisms. And what is the need of reproduction? We know that every species, every organism that takes birth on the earth must die. So if there is no reproduction, the species will be swept out from the earth. Therefore, reproduction is essential for the continuation of generation of several species on the earth. Now, types of reproduction. There are two types of reproduction. One is sexual reproduction and another is asexual reproduction. By the name, we can guess that in sexual reproduction, sex cells are involved. And what are sex cells? Sex cells are also called as gametes. In case of males, it is sperm, and in case of female, it is ovum. Now, by gamete, I mean those cells which are haploid in nature and are specialized to perform the action of reproduction. Right? So, in sexual reproduction, a sperm and an ovum fuse together and form a single cell called a zygote. That zygote gives rise to a multicellular organism. For example, we all were zygote at the beginning of life. We were a single cell at the beginning point of our life, right? So that single cell gave rise to us, and now we have millions and billions and trillions of cells in our bodies. And in asexual reproduction, A means the absence of sex gametes, absence of sex cells. So in asexual reproduction, there is no gamete. There is a single parent and there is no gamete. So asexual reproduction in organisms. There are four types of asexual reproduction that are given in your NCERT. First is budding, second is spore formation, third is fragmentation and regeneration, and fourth is vegetative propagation. So let us start with budding. It is the process of reproduction in which an outgrowth called bud is produced in the body of an organism. This bud, after maturity, gets separated from the parent and shapes into a complete organism. Let me give an example. For example, this is a hydra. This is a hydra which belongs to which phylum? It belongs to phylum Coelenterata. Right? It performs asexual reproduction. Now you can see that this parent, this is the parent, and it is the outgrowth called as bud. This bud in future will separate out from the parent hydra and will form a new hydra. Right? This is called as budding. Now spore formation. It is the second asexual reproduction that is given in your NCERT. In this type of reproduction, tiny dot-like structures are formed in a particular region of a body of an organism called as sporangia. Those tiny structures are called as spores. When they are released, they are covered by a coating called as cyst. Until and unless the proper conditions arrive, those spores will be inside the cyst. So we can see an organism here which is called as rhizopus or bread mold. In this structure, in this diagram, you can easily get what is a sporangia. The singular form of sporangia is called a sporangium. This is an organism, and this particular part is called as sporangium. In this sporangium, these little these little structures, dot like structures, are called as spores, which are formed and get mature. The sporangium will burst when it wants to reproduce, and these spores will be released. And when these spores will get a specific and useful environment, then they will come out of the cyst, which is the covering of each spore, and then the spore will grow into a complete rhizopus. Clear? Okay. Now, fragmentation in regeneration. It is the third one given in your NCERT. So first, what is fragmentation? When an organism is reproducing by dividing itself into small fragments, then it is called fragmentation. In fragmentation, the organism keeps growing continuously unless and until it gets disturbed by outer environment. For example, Spirogyra. You have seen in some ponds, might be, that there is a greenish coating developed on the surface of the pond. That is some kind of algae, right? That reproduces by fragmentation. Let me show you some image. See, see, this is a Spirogyra. This is a Spirogyra. Now, this is the parent. This parent divides itself or breaks itself into three or more. Maybe it is 2, 3, 4, or many more. It divides itself into some fragments, and these fragments in future make adult Spirogyra, right? And what is regeneration? Regeneration is actually not a process of reproduction, but it is a process of recovery after an accident, right? And by chance, by default, it gives rise to new organisms, but it is not a process generally used by any organism, right? For example, this is a planaria. This is a planaria. If I take a planaria and cut it into 2 pieces or 3 pieces or 4 or many more pieces, all pieces will develop themselves into adult planaria, right? If I cut this planaria into 2 pieces, the 2 pieces will give rise to 2 new planaria. This is called as regeneration. Now, what is the difference between fragmentation and regeneration? They are pretty similar, but there are differences also. For example, in regeneration, the organism does not break by itself. It is disturbed, or we cut the organism or disturb the organism or harm the organism. But in fragmentation, the organism divides by all itself. And the second thing is that in regeneration, for example, if I cut the head, then the head will develop into a complete planaria, and the rest of the body that was cut from the head will also develop a head, and therefore 2 new planaria will be formed. But the growth will stop when the complete planaria will be formed. But in fragmentation, the Spirogyra will continue to grow throughout the life unless and until it is disturbed. Clear? And at last, vegetative propagation. In this type of asexual reproduction, some specific parts of the plant reproduce other than flowers. See, flowers are specialized for reproduction. So it will come in sexual reproduction, because when they are flowers, they reproduce sexually. But there are some other parts like stem and leaf. They are not specialized for reproduction. There are no gametes. But we know that when, for example, bryophyllum, if we see the bryophyllum, there are buds on the leaf margins. So it can reproduce vegetatively, because the leaf is a vegetative part but not a reproductive part. A reproductive part of a plant is a flower, but we can see many organisms which can reproduce asexually from leaves, stems, and roots. For example, potato. There are buds. You can see there are buds, right? If you chop a potato and plant it where the bud is present, you plant it in a soil and give water and nutrition and sunlight, it will give rise to another potato plant, right? So this is vegetative propagation. For example, bryophyllum. There are buds present on the margin of leaf of bryophyllum plant. So if you take the leaf of the bryophyllum plant, it will give rise to another bryophyllum plant asexually. So we have covered all types of asexual reproduction given in your NCRT. So in the next lecture, we will be dealing with sexual mode of reproduction. Okay? So thank you all for attending this lecture and seeing this lecture, and I think you have learned something new. So please do subscribe our channel if you are new and hit the like button if you have liked the video. Thank you. See you soon.